Hi, I'm a nobody. You don't know me, and I don't know you, but today I wanted to talk about dark academia and. Oh, wait, sorry. 1 second. Much better. So before we get to the who of who I am, because again, you don't know me, I don't know you, I want to talk about the what, and so you can decide if you want to stay and listen or watch or whatever to this bit of rambling, right? This is an introductory video discussing what I've perceived in the dark academia community as a lack of discussion on a text that I would consider a much greater watershed to the movement than Donna Tartt's The Secret History, which I have not read. Don't crucify me. I'm not saying it's a bad book. I just think that when it comes to the things that the movement of dark academia loves and praises and seeks to kind of draw attention to, the elitism in academia, the importance of not utterly idealizing the subject, that struggle between the ideal world you craft in your head and the oftentimes uncaring, unfeeling bits of reality that you butt up against when you attempt to achieve those ideals. I'm sure, because again, I have not read The Secret History, I'm sure The Secret History touches on those things beautifully. I realized that in the dark academia movement, at least as long as I've been aware of it, which is for the past year and a half or whenever it first got popular on Instagram, I never see people talking about what I would consider a better book than that, which is this book, Jude the Obscure by Thomas Hardy. It's one of, if not my favorite novel, and I read it in high school for an independent reading project. I rarely meet other humans who have read it, and so I want to just talk about it now, and I want to make some more videos discussing the book more in depth, the different parts and the themes, but for now I just want to kind of overview what Jude the Obscure is and who I am. So without further ado, let's begin. And I guess, much to my chagrin, we should start with who I am before we get into talking about Thomas Hardy and Jude the Obscure, although they are infinitely more interesting than I am. Hi, I'm Michael. I went to a public university and studied English Lit and linguistics, and almost minored in creative writing, but I'm not born of Ivy League ilk, either by design or by genetics. Neither of my parents went to college. Most of my family didn't go to college. So I don't hail from a small New England college town. I'm from the Midwest, right? Born and raised. My parents work construction. I own most of the books in our house. This is my wardrobe, right? The closest I ever came to the dark academia aesthetic, I guess there were two things now that I'm thinking about it. The second is directly related to the first. We'll talk about the first. But when I was in high school, the only college I applied to, which I would say I don't recommend, but I do. It's your life. Live it how you want to live it and not with backup plans. The only college I applied to was St. John's College, a small liberal arts school in New England that focuses on the Great Books program. You're placed into a house when you first get there. There's something like 300 students in total, which is the size of my high school. So it's a very, very, very small school. And they read the great books, and there's no textbooks. There are no grades. It's all just seminar after seminar. You have to learn ancient Greek and you have to learn French. It's a dream, right? I learned about it from my French teacher, whose father went to Yale and then taught medieval literature at a university in Indiana whose name I'm forgetting right now. And I fell in love with it. I toured, I met so many great people, I met so many great faculty. It was a dream, right? I applied and I got in, full scholarship and all that kind of stuff. And then I didn't go because my senior year, I was in a relationship with another girl from my high school, and she still had to finish finish out her high school career. I'm like, okay, well, I'll stay here for a year, and then we'll make our plans for what's going on afterwards. So I stayed. Things didn't work. Surprise. And I didn't end up going to St. John's for a lot of reasons, because life happens, right? The second time I got really close to the dark academia aesthetic was when I was in Ireland. And I was in Dublin. I toured Trinity College because I was thinking about attending. This was post-breakup. I was a mess. And so I fled to Ireland for 14 days, took my best friend with me, and I toured Trinity as a prospective student. Didn't go there, kind of came to my senses, said, look, it's not going to do you any good to flee across the ocean and go to a foreign university. Let's just kind of confront your problems head on and deal with them. And so I did. So I went to public university for 3 years. I finished a year early because I started a year late. Did degrees in English Lit and linguistics. I met fantastic people, could not have been happier. So that's my pedigree, kind of, right? I can't think of anything else to say about myself, to be honest. That's probably too much information to begin with. So that's me. I'm just a dude. I'm not a professional YouTuber. As you can tell by this setup, I'm using a Logitech webcam. I don't have a fancy Canon 4K that is exposing every pore on my face, thank God. My lighting is garbage, a really kind of cheap ring light and a box light up here doing something. So I just was thinking about Jude the Obscure after watching a video analyzing dark academia, and I wanted to talk about it because I don't see a lot of people talking about Jude the Obscure. And with that, what a fantastic segue into the more interesting part of this video, which is Jude the Obscure. So where to start? Well, according to Thomas Hardy's diary, Jude the Obscure started out as, quote, a short story of a young man who could not afford to go to Oxford. And I'm not going to spoil anything in this first video. It's just going to be an overview of the themes and why I think Jude the Obscure works really well as a poster child for the dark academia movement, alongside, I'm sure, Donna Tartt's The Secret History, which again, have not read. I'm sure it's fantastic. Thomas Hardy was a really, really well-known author in the late 19th century. Jude the Obscure was his final novel, published in the late 80s? 1895 is when this was published. Hardy was born in 1840, so he was 55 when he wrote this. It was his last novel. He wrote another novel that people usually know called Tess to Ubervilles, and like The Mayor of Casterbridge. But this novel was really his last, for a lot of reasons. The main reason being it was so harshly lambasted by so many people. It's not a happy book. It is probably the darkest, if not one of the darkest books I have ever read. And I don't shy away from darkness, right? I love Nabokov, and Nabokov does so much comically dark and not comically dark and just dark in so many of his stories. Lolita is the obvious answer, right? But there's also a lot of darkness in Pale Fire. There's a lot of kind of gallows humor in Pnin. The Glory is the story of a Balkan, I think he's a Slav, who wants to impress this girl so much that he tries to break into the USSR and get past the Russian barricades. And it goes about as well as you'd expect it to go, right? Like, why didn't they try to get back into the USSR? But Jude the Obscure is on a different level. I don't believe in trigger warnings. I didn't get any when I was reading Jude the Obscure. If you want to know exactly what you need to be warned about, there's, death, there's sexual themes, manipulation, and one particular scene towards the end of the book that is heartbreaking. And I never expected it to happen inside of a text. But why? Why is Jude the Obscure so dark, and why was the response so bad? The response was so bad, in fact, that Hardy tells the tale of the bishop. I don't know if he was the Bishop of Cambridge or if he was just a bishop in England at the time, who, when he was reading the book, he either finished it or got to a certain point and he just threw it in the fire. I mean, Hardy really believes that he burned the book in effigy or in substitute for not being able to burn Hardy himself. And that could be for a lot of reasons, right? Jude the Obscure, like Hardy says, is a story of a poor boy who could not afford to go to Oxford. And in the text, the University of Christminster is kind of a stand-in for Oxbridge. And all of the priests and the bishops and the well-to-do go to Christminster. And when Jude gets there, he kind of realizes, you know, his ideals are kind of shattered, right? So to give a brief overview of the text, which is not spoilers in any way, just an idea of what happens at the very beginning and kind of the feel of where it goes. The story follows Jude as a young boy. He's a literal orphan living in a poor village some 50 miles out of Christminster, the Oxford analog here. His parents are both dead. He lives with his aunt who thinks he's good for nothing and prizes, you know, living her life her way as opposed to raising this young boy. And in this village, the book opens up with the schoolmaster leaving, Mr. Philistine, and Jude is devastated. He couldn't go to school, right, because he had to work for his aunt and help the people in the village so he could make some money so he could support himself and her so they could live, because she was a hard taskmaster. And so the text talks about how none of the other schoolboys came to help Mr. Philistine leave and pack up, or they weren't really sad to see him go, because they were with him every day, right? When you're with somebody every day, or when you're in school every day, that kind of platonic ideal of education quickly fades away, as all of us know. And you get into the realities of education and the realities of students being unruly and the realities of teachers not being perfect all the time. But the text says that Jude didn't do that. He only went occasionally, and so he could keep that idealism. And so when Mr. Philistine left, he's so heartbroken because it's this great role model he's had who's leaving the village, who's doing what he kind of secretly wishes he could do, but can't. And Mr. Philistine's a great character. The text, it's like in the very first paragraph, opens up talking about this piano that Mr. Philistine bought that they're trying to find a place for, that he can't fit on the wagon to Christminster. And they talk about how he found it like 8 years ago, and he's like, you know what? It'd be really cool if I knew how to play the piano. And so he bought it, and he's dragged it along with him from place to place to place as he's moved and taught and gone to school, and he still has not sat down to play the piano. He thinks, I'll get to that at some point. I don't want to get rid of it because I know I'm going to get to it. I know I'm going to get to it. I just need to find the right time, and it's never the right time, right? And again, you can see it from the very beginning of this story. It's that conflict between that kind of ideal, I'm going to do this, wouldn't it be so great, in a perfect world I would learn the piano, and the reality of, it's not like I don't want to do it, just other things keep getting in the way. And that's the first paragraph, or the second paragraph of the text is that, and it just continues and continues and continues. That's Mr. Philistine, and so he leaves. Jude is very sad, and afterwards, this kind of gives you a characterization of who Jude is as a person, right? And one of my favorite scenes. So his job in the village is to clack away the crows from this cornfield. Maybe it was wheat, some kind of field, doesn't really matter. And he's thinking about Mr. Philistine leaving, all the lessons he learned from him, and he's clacking away these crows, and he's watching them, and he sees them descend, and he has this thought in his mind of, you're birds, you just want to eat, just like me. I'm doing this so I can have money, so I can have food, so I can eat. We're the same. You birds looking to get some extra seed from this farmer, me trying to protect his field so I can get some extra feed from the farmer, essentially. We're the same. And how could I ever keep you from eating, keep you from doing what I want to do? And he throws his clacker down, and cries about how he's one with the birds and he sees you and I understand you. And the farmer, looking off, sees him and is pissed. He's lame, but he like hobbles and runs. He's old, up to the field, grabs Jude by the scruff, bends him over his leg, and just like not beats the crap out of him, but he spanks him pretty good. And he says, "What do you think you're doing? You're gonna let these birds eat my grain? You have no right to do that. Why would you ever do that?" And he's saying, "But sir, we're the same. We're the same. I'm the birds. They're me." And the farmer doesn't care. He just keeps spanking him and says, "You don't have a job here anymore. Get out. Don't come back." And then Jude thinks, "Oh my gosh, well, my aunt's going to be upset and she'll disown me and I'll be abandoned forever." And so he runs across the field and he runs and runs and runs until he comes across this barn. And there are two carpenters working on it. And Jude's crying and he hears them talking about Christminster that Mr. Philliston was talking about when he was leaving, because Jude knows he's going there. And he asked them, have you seen Christminster? Do you know which way it is or what's it like? And they're just carpenters, right? So they haven't gone there, but maybe they've heard stories. And so they say, oh, it's a city of light. It's where teachers of men come from and go to. It's where this great learning happens. It's fantastic. It's a dream. It's where every scholar should go to. And he asked them, which way is it? And they say, well, it's just about 50 miles down here. On a clear night, you can see the lights of the city just on the horizon. And Jude hopes and prays in his heart that like tonight's one of those nights. And so he climbs up the ladder they're using to work on the barn, and he lays back on the roof, looking in the direction of Christminster, and he swears that just on the horizon he sees the beginnings of light of Christminster, where Mr. Philliston is. And this becomes much like Gatsby's green light, that thing he's looking out for all the time, right? This is Jude's goal. This is Jude's ideal. He seeks after it. He wants to attain this. It becomes his goal. And that's what the rest of his time in the village is. He has to track down some Latin and Greek grammars, because back in those days, if you wanted to enter university, and this was the case pretty much until the mid to late 19th century, but if you wanted to enter university, they didn't really have secondary school or primary school like we consider them now, right? They just had entrance exams. And so if you wanted to enter university, you had to know Latin, you had to know Greek. If you wanted to study scriptures or religious studies, you had to know Hebrew as well. Maybe some basic rudimentary geometry, but that's it. It wasn't, you have to be a certain age, you have completed a certain school. It's, can you do these things? If yes, you can matriculate. So in a sense, we kind of do our education backwards, in that primary school was invented later, and we used to only have tertiary school. But that's a conversation for another video or discussion. So Jude studies, tries to find some grammars, because remember, he's a poor orphan and books are expensive, even in the 19th century where this text is set. But he works and works and works, and he studies and studies and studies, and he gets there. And that's like page 30, and there's like 200, 300 pages left of the novel. And it's an odyssey. It is a poor boy's ideals coming up against the reality of an education system that is inherently classist. I know that The Secret History talks about that. I know that The Secret History talks about the dangers of abstraction away from like individuals and people. Jude the Obscure is full of that. There's so many scenes where there's someone he sees coming from the university speaking some Latin, but then when he goes and like asks him about anything, he doesn't know. Like the student doesn't know, and Jude's like, you don't know these things? You're from the university? So there's all kinds of abstraction going on. But it's so hard to give a big picture without spoiling things. This isn't like an overview, it's just an introduction. But hopefully that taste kind of makes you want to read the novel. If you haven't, I suggest it. I suggest everyone read Jude the Obscure. I try to read it every single year. It's not happy. It's not. There are plenty of Bildungsroman that are happy, or that revel in the triumph of youth over a world that wants to snuff it out. Jude the Obscure is not one of those novels, right? But it's a good novel, and it's an important novel. It's a novel that dark academia could really benefit from, and I'm surprised I don't see it talked about more. So that's all I have, I guess. So in the next video, I'm going to be talking about the first couple of chapters of Jude the Obscure, what happens, kind of analyzing them and seeing what happens, talking about how they relate to dark academia themes. And if that interests you, stick around. If you watched this far, I appreciate it. Thank you, if only for the drip, as the kids say. I don't know how often I'll update this or what I'll do with this or if I'll do anything with it at all. But I was really struck by Jude the Obscure lately. And even though I have 10 million other things to do with teaching and music and a bunch of things I have to do for my work, I wanted to do this. And so we'll talk about Jude the Obscure. As a final note, there are a couple of other novels that I think dark academia could really benefit from. I think I've seen this novel talked about recently, actually, and that is Stoner by John Williams. Stoner follows Stoner, Professor Stoner. He is a farm boy in Missouri who goes to the newly opened university in Missouri pre-World War II to study agricultural science. And when he gets there, it's practical, right? He's the son of a farmer. This university says, hey, we'll teach you how to farm better. His dad and his mom go, listen, we'd love to have you on the farm. We need you on the farm, but this will be good for us. This will be good for you. You should go and do it. He goes to the university. He studies agricultural science for a semester. His second semester, he takes one Intro to English course. And the professor there, he's responding to a question or whatever, and the professor looks at him and says, you're going to be an English professor. He can just tell that Stoner's been bit by that bug, whether it's love or rapture or enslavement or whatever you want to call it, to English, to the text, to literature. It's a speech act more than it is a prophecy of something, right? And it follows Stoner's whole academic career, right? He switches majors from agricultural science to English, and he finishes his degree. He goes for a grad degree at this department under those same professors. While he's in grad school, World War II breaks out, and it's him and two other students in the department. He stays behind. The other two end up going off to war, and he deals with, the ramifications of that and everything that happens. Again, not a happy novel, but a good novel. So yeah, that's all. I could ramble for forever, and I don't want to. So that's the introduction of Jude the Obscure. I hope it's piqued your interest. I love the novel. We're going to talk about it more in the forthcoming videos, and that's a bit of intro as to who I am. So if you have any questions or observations or disagree with anything, or if Dark Academia has talked about this book and you know someone who has, put it in the comments or whatever people do. Send me a message or whatever, and I'd love to hear more from you guys. So we'll see you all later. I don't have a good sign-off phrase. I don't have a good catchphrase. I don't have a good anything. But thanks for listening, and we'll talk more about Jude the Obscure next time. So with that, good afternoon, good evening, and good night.